Spark the Electric Jester. This is a game that I had originally recorded for about 5 minutes of footage to fill in for my Game of the Year list last year. And what you didn't see about that is after I recorded 5 minutes of filler footage, I then proceeded to complete the game in one sitting, because this game is kind of amazing. Like, spoilers, this might be on my Game of the Year list this year. It's just that amazing. It's a great little series, and I really want everyone to know about this and get as many sales for the series as possible because it's really that good. The story to Spark the Electric Jester follows the titular Spark, a yellow who has earned his electrical engineering degree. However, having a degree doesn't exactly guarantee a job. I feel for you, Spark, I really do. So, he decides to take some basic electrician gigs, except those jobs eventually get automated and replace him with robots. But he has a backup plan. Using his electrical engineering know-how, he invents an electric jester's cap to allow him to control electricity and become a street performer that no one actually pays attention to or watches. I'm really feeling for you there, Spark. Seriously, I'm right there with you, buddy. But he does eventually manage to land a job at a circus, which is fantastic. Way to go, buddy. Except he gets replaced by a robot clone of him who is absolutely best boy. And now this entire automated world is just having this awesome robotic renaissance, which is fantastic for everyone except Spark. But as with all robot-based utopias, eventually a virus comes along and sends everything into violent rampages. And Spark volunteers to go and try and save the day because, well, he's got nothing better to do. And maybe he'll get his job back. The story to Spark is silly, goofy, and fun. It's very, very prone to goofy little jokes here and there. Every boss you run into tends to have like a few lines of dialogue and a back and forth with him. One frequently appearing boss, Romulo, tends to be very, very silly and goofy, and he's a lot of fun. You'll run into your robotic clone, whom Spark dubs Fark, as a portmanteau of Faker and Spark. Faker, you're not even good enough to be his fake. He's best boy. And all the character interactions in this game actually feel very, very good and silly, and it feels like the characters do have a lot of personality. And what's even better is, this did become a series. This lays the seeds for what the series would become and lays a lot of the groundwork for the overarching story of the series. It does it very, very well. And ultimately, for what this game is, it's a really solid story. It's deep, it's got some great environmental storytelling about the world and the characters in it, and even just running around the environments, you'll see little bits that fill in the gaps as to where you are, what this world is, what it's like to be there, and this whole world feels very well thought out and interesting. The story to Spark the Electric Jester is silly and goofy, but is really well done, and I think it punches well above its weight class for a game like this. The best way I can describe Spark the Electric Jester's gameplay is Sonic the Hedgehog, specifically Sonic Advance, I feel like this has the closest ties with Sonic Advance, meets Kirby, with like a little bit of Mega Man X mixed in, and just for good measure, throw in a combo system. And that's kind of what this game is. It is a high-speed platformer. First and foremost, you play as the titular Spark, running around trying to get to the end of stages. In between the start and the end of stage, there's going to be lots of enemies, including mini-bosses and bosses, and you have to whip out Spark's many attacks. He's got standard attacks, he's got a dash that gives him temporary invulnerability, but it's only for like a fraction of a second, which makes it a very, very awkward thing to use if you want to try and survive with it. And you'll have to on the final campaign of the game, so maybe master the instant dash a little bit. He can charge his attacks to allow him to use a projectile ability, and if he uses this while jumping, he can actually aim it at the ground and give himself effectively an extra jump. And that's where this game sort of focuses pretty much everything into it. This game feels like it's very, very much about what Sonic the Hedgehog was always touted as being, a high-speed platformer. But, and I like to always point this out, as much as Sega wants people to believe Sonic was about speed, he really kind of wasn't. If you play the earlier games, there was a lot of downtime. They were actually very, very slow. Sonic was more than anything, it was just about solid platforming. Spark is about solid platforming, but also about the speed, about the movement, about trying to defeat enemies using your various powers, and trying to find all these different secret nooks and crannies to get new powers, because like I said, it's a little bit like Kirby. At least in the sense that there's a bunch of different powers. In addition to the main repertoire of abilities that Spark has that I've already gone over, there's about a dozen or so different abilities that you can pick up in the form of different outfits for him. You can store 2 outfits at a time, one being your active one and one being in backup, so that if you somehow lose the one you have or you want to swap out, you can store one for whenever you want to swap. You can swap at any point, which is great. These forms kind of come in 2 different flavors. You've got ones that are geared more towards the movement mechanics, and ones geared closer to combat. The combat ones are basically there to fight enemies, especially the big bad ones, and the movement ones are all about getting through the environment in fun, creative, inventive ways. But every costume completely changes the way Spark controls and plays, and kind of changes the game in how you interact with the world around you. For example, a couple of movement abilities, such as Edgy's ability to climb walls, the Jet Board's ability to not only basically jump indefinitely, allows you to float on water because of buoyancy. Ice allows you to skate over the top of water, and air gives you basically unlimited jumping, allowing for some really cool precision movement through the air to avoid enemies and get through them, and get through the stage faster. Combat abilities include stuff like Hammer, which allows you to not only bop enemies for a lot of damage, but also utilize your combo meter to create a projectile attack. You have stuff like Sword, which is great for just dealing raw damage, and one I'm particularly fond of, Knight, which allows you to use your combo meter to create a shield which gives you extra health, which is unbelievably invaluable on the final campaign, because that is very, very difficult. You will very quickly learn to love the Knight power-up. You also have stuff like Firepower and Magic, Gravity. There's a ton of different abilities here, and they all change the way you approach the situation, whether you're platforming about or encountering enemies or mini-bosses. And it's surprising how much different gameplay they've actually packed into each and every single one of these abilities. When I streamed my entire playthrough just to record for this video, I had ended up acquiring the Hammer power-up. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the Hammer. My go-to melee attack is either Sword or the Knight power, but I quickly learned, oh, I can expend my combo to do this and create like an explosion of the ground to damage enemies? That's amazing! And that's just on top of every other attack it gets, and you have available to you. Combine that with the fact that you can swap abilities at any time, and you can create some interesting combat combos as well as movement combos, just depending on what 2 abilities you have on you at any one point. Experimentation is heavily rewarded here, and trying to test out all the different abilities to find the best combo for you is encouraged and indeed very satisfying, especially when you get to sort of the flow state of this game. Like I said, this game really does embrace speed, and when you find the proper racing line to get through a stage, find the perfect times to jump and utilize your extra aerial abilities to just get that little tiny foot of extra air so that you just sail through the environment without hitting anything, oh, it feels just magical. The movement in this game just feels so rewarding and satisfying to pull off. I imagine this game would be amazing for speedruns if that's sort of your thing. But if you just want a solid platformer with good movement, oh my god, I struggle to find a better one that I've played recently. This is kind of amazing how quality the movement and combat in this game is. You also have a combo meter that you can build up by damaging enemies and not getting hit yourself, and you get extra little buffs and powers as you use it. Combine this with all the various different power-ups that utilize your combo meter in different ways, and you actually have a very, very robust set of mechanics here for both combat and movement. This game is also huge. There's something like 16 worlds in this game, and like each world is broken up into 2 parts, so there's like over 30 levels to this. And every single one of them feels functionally very, very different. They feel visibly different. They have different stuff going on in the backgrounds that sort of tell a story of this world, like I said, but they also feel like they have different obstacles and ways to tackle the environments themselves, as well as foreground storytelling as to what you're doing and why you're doing it. And it's just an unbelievably huge game. I was surprised when I streamed this again, and I've got some experience with this game. One playthrough of the basic campaign was like 3.5 hours. I get surprised as to how big this game is every single time I play it, just because there's such a huge number of levels, and some of the levels are really, really big. And yet, none of it ever feels reused or disinteresting, Every single level has its own unique quirks and gimmicks and mechanics that keep it fresh. And I mean, that's only the first campaign. There's like, kinda sorta 4 of them, because after the first campaign as Spark, you unlock a second campaign where you play as Best Boy Fark, who doesn't have all the transformations of Spark, significantly less health, but he does acquire some of the movement tech of some of the different forms all rolled into one. He gets one transformation if you can use his combo meter properly, as well as a bunch of unique abilities exclusive to him, and a parry mechanic that is absolutely necessary if you want to survive the harder fights. Plus, he gets some fights that are entirely exclusive to himself, if taken in the greater understanding of where the series goes, explains a lot about what's going on in the story, and, on their own are just some fun, edgy boss fights. Perhaps what's most impressive about this is they actively allow you to use an entire boss skill set as Spark. He plays pretty much entirely like his boss fight does, and it's always impressive to me that you actually get a boss that plays like they did as a boss, It feels like they actually took the boss's entire moveset and made it playable and didn't completely throw out the balance. It's really impressive playing as this guy. The third campaign has Spark doing Fark's missions, except he has even less health and no parry, so again, get real comfortable using that instant defense dash, because otherwise you are going to get smudged rather badly. With the final campaign sorta kinda being a challenge mode where, honestly, only one of them's actually all that difficult, and it's really, 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 really difficult. But when you complete that, you unlock some special stuff for replaying the game over and over again. This game has such an unbelievable amount of content for what is ostensibly a small indie game made by one person. And in terms of quality, in terms of polish, it is remarkably well done. This game completely dunks on anything Sega's put out using their blue thing. I'm honestly thoroughly impressed with the quality of this game, the amount of content, and just how enjoyable it is as an experience, and how it's constantly throwing something new your way. This game is honestly quite brilliant in terms of gameplay. Now, I did find about 3 things I could complain about that I found issue with this game. The most important issue I ran into this game was on one of the later levels, you're on this battleship and there's these giant missiles flying around you. If they explode, and they will explode, the screen does violently flash. I'm not going to show any footage of that, obviously, but I can tell you, I'm someone with mild photosensitivity. I did end up getting some pretty bad headaches on that one particular level. So if you do have photosensitivity, I think you're going to have to skip this one, which is really unfortunate because it is unbelievably good. And you'll notice this especially on the harder difficulties. The hitboxes can be a little shaky at times. You sometimes run into situations where you swear you should have dodged something and you still get hit, and it does feel like a cheap death here and there. It's not too bad, but it happens every now and then. The final issue I had was just with one specific mini-boss. For whatever reason, you drop into this pit and you're supposed to fight this mini-boss, but I dropped to the right side of the pit and it just sort of started the fight with me spawned in a wall, and I was just stuck there. Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, this one fight is just designed this way, and I'm not really sure why. But the fact is, the fights in this game are amazing. The bosses are really creative and massive, and are really interesting and well done. So you know what? I'm willing to overlook that one weird hiccup for how quality the rest of this game is, and again, for being basically a one-person project, it's remarkable. It's this amazing. The presentation to Spark the Electric Jester is ridiculously high quality for what it is. The visuals are gorgeous, the backgrounds, how they tell stories of the environment, and you kind of see it when you go to the area with the giant fans in the background. Before that you saw a sign that told you about, how global circulation needs to be improved by buying fans. I love that. I love the background storytelling. The backgrounds are beautiful. The individual sprites are beautiful. There are jokes and references everywhere. I mean, Spark's hat is a reference to Kirby Superstar, flat out. And it's just a brilliant time. The character designs are great. I love Spark. I absolutely love Fark. I would love to get an action figure of him. These are really likable characters with some fun designs, and they are in a world that is equally beautiful. There's also some cutscenes that definitely look like they were animated differently than the rest of the sprites, but they're pretty high quality too. Overall, the visuals are just fantastic, and the amount of detail they've crammed into these sprites and these worlds is just mind-blowing. Audio-wise, the soundtrack is absolute fire. It's really quite a shame that you can't actually buy the soundtrack with the Steam version. You have to go to an individual Bandcamp for it. But I think that's to give the people who worked on the soundtrack the share of the profits, which that's good. As a customer, it's a little annoying to go that far your way, but trust me, it's It's worth it. The soundtrack to this game is remarkable. There's a lot of really nice high-energy songs like FM Fields, the first stage. The sewer levels are very, very sort of moody. Same with like the fire area. When you go to one of the later stages, Mega Raft Fleets, which is like the level with all the flashing, so I won't show it off, it gets sort of like this really nice orchestral sort of chanting in the background, and it feels like you are taking on the entire world as this little yellow guy, and it is just so bloody empowering. They absolutely nailed the sound design to this game, and the soundtrack is just amazing. Overall, the presentation, like everything else to Spark the Electric Jester, punches well above its weight class. This game is remarkable, it is amazing, and it looks and sounds fantastic. Now, if you want a copy of Spark the Electric Jester on Steam, and you should if I've done my job right, because I think this is one everyone needs, it's a must-have, it is available for about $9. This game is worth less than $10. Do you know how many copies of this you could buy instead of, like, Sonic Frontiers? And how much better a time you'd have with this? Like, it is remarkable, but hey, it's okay, I get it. You know, if Sonic Advance meets Kirby isn't your style, I get it. How about one of the sequels? You can buy this in a bundle, and the sequels are basically Sonic Adventure 2 meets Devil May Cry. And it's as awesome as that sounds. Seriously, this series is so remarkably good, and coming from basically one fan's, you know, passion to make a cool Sonic-style game, they made something that completely blows Sonic out of the water. I have said this for so long that Sega really should just give up Sonic to the fans, because they don't know what they're doing with them. You know, the only good Sonic game to come out of like the past 10 years was Sonic Mania, and that was a fan game that Sega slapped their name on. The fact is, between this and Freedom Planet and, you know, Sonic Mania, it's pretty apparent that the fans have a better idea of what to do with Sonic than, you know, Sega does. And to be fair, it's actually not that complicated, Sega, because we all know you're listening. It's to stop adding gimmicks. That's it. People just want good, relatively fast-paced, solid platforming. Don't need anything else, really. That's what's been proven with all these fan games. They get it. They just want really good, high-speed, polished platforming. Spark gives it to you in spades. It has 2 amazing sequels you can get in a bundle, and you should, because, oh my god, it's so good. Also, the third game actually just got an update last week that includes basically all the second game in it as just free levels. Yeah, just have a free update that gives you double the size of a game. No big deal. You know, I am thoroughly impressed with Spark the Electric Jester and the developer of this game. I will always point out that a single developer has effectively done what Sega could not. This game completely dunks on what Sonic is currently, and for a fraction of the budget, for a fraction of the cost, you can have a significantly better, more polished adventure. It's remarkable, and I will say what this game and its 2 sequels have done has earned enough goodwill in my heart for Feeperd Games that I will go out of my way and just sight unseen buy their games. I will do that. I just want to support this developer so much because they've done something so remarkably well. And you know what? I'm hoping that some other people have gotten interested in Spark as well, because this is not one to sleep on. Spark the Electric Jester. It does Sonic better than Sonic, because Feeperd does what Say can't. Oh. Awesome. Also, they put a spring right there. That's kind of a silly move.